in early September. Real quick, just about me to give a little bit of context. Again, I'm Tyler, N2RTS. I was licensed in August of 2021 after a family member, K4SHR, was like, hey, you should really get involved with this. It seems to check all your boxes. Sat down, studied for the test in a week, took it at the end, and walked away with a tech license. And as mentioned earlier, I'm a computer scientist here at Yale University. I'm also the station manager here for our university station, which I'm very excited to announce as of tomorrow, we'll have a HF component being installed. We've recently come into a TS480 and a Cushcraft MA5B antenna, so we'll be installing that with our health and safety team tomorrow, which is super exciting. And inside of the WI4RC team, I'm one of the project leads for one of our stations, and outside of all that, I'm also a VE with the Greater Los Angeles Radio Group, where we do exams now all computerized and over the internet, saving us tons of time in both postage and checking a bunch of boxes. So enough about me, though, a little bit about tonight. So WI4RC was started a couple years ago with the idea of an amateur radio club for young operators by young operators. Oftentimes what we found is, like, for example, I'm from just south of Washington, D.C. There wasn't a club within 40 miles of where I lived. And so when I got into this, it was basically I knew myself, I knew my uncle, and no other operators. And a lot of other kind of young operators as well kind of felt the same of if you couldn't drive or your parents didn't trust you to drive that far, there really wasn't any way to connect with other people in the hobby aside from trying to get on the air and finding and memorizing names. And realizing that we also wanted to try and kind of consolidate youth involved, because it was like we knew we were out there, we just didn't know where to find people. One of our friends, David KF1SHY, started in October 2017. It was a simple post on an internet forum saying, hey, I'm looking at starting a youth club, would love to connect with others. And it just kind of took off from there. It started with roughly about maybe 10 or 11 people, slowly scaled up to 100. This year, we broke a little over 1,500 active members. And after about a year, we realized, hey, for a club, we probably need a call sign. And so we requested for and got the WI4RC, which, as we saw, it was the YARC, YARC, WI4. So worked out pretty well, and we're quite proud of it. And David stepped away at that point and transitioned to our current club president and vice president, Caleb KZOP and Austin K0AXL. And one thing I do want to stress again is we have about roughly 1,400 both members in from anywhere from 15 to 25 and beyond. And that's one thing I do like to stress of, even though our purpose is to be a club for young operators, we don't have a formal application. There's no real restrictions. It's just expected that any member of the club would be interested and invested in promoting and advancing amateur radio amongst youth operators. And as such, we allow anyone in. But the super fun thing of being a internet connected club is, even though we might not have a physical place to meet up, we're able to run a lot of simultaneous efforts online. So to give a very, very short kind of intro here to some of the things that our youth do, and I'll spend about a moment on each of these here. So the main thing is our communications platform. I know that Mark recently started up a Discord, and I know KC1NQE is a frequent poster in the POTA channel on that. We've kind of started up something similar for a lot of our efforts in terms of not just okay, here's something for everyone to hang out in, but we often have people posting questions of, hey, how can I fix my setup? How could I build this kit? Hey, I think there's something wrong here. So a lot of both technical discussion as well as just community building as well, which is super awesome. And as we kind of say, there's help available 24/7. It might not be the same person every time, but there's enough people with enough licenses across the world that someone's going to probably know the answer, which is super awesome. One thing we've recently started was a DMR digital voice net. We initially tried a HF net and came to the conclusion that it was just too many people in too many places to try and get some type of reliable net going. So at one point we were running off of, if anyone's heard of a JS8Call, we were originally using that with relay stations, but then realized switching to a DMR net running off a couple hotspots was a little easier to get everyone connected at once. One thing these next two projects I'll actually save for another slide to kind of show a little bit of our club's goal of contributing back at large, is the software repo, the digital rewrite, and the open wiki. But then real quick, a new project that actually just got picked up by ARL News about a month ago is W1BTR is looking at creating, interestingly, a Minecraft modification, like a side piece to the game of trying to basically implement RF theory into it to use it as kind of an educational tool to help excite others into getting involved with radio is one idea. And then the club was also a integral supporter of the ARL version of Canada. I forget what they stand for, but I know it's RAC. They ran a special event with a bunch of internet meme inspired call signs, as Canada actually will allow you to pick a custom call instead of doing the 1-by-1 format the US does. So the Canadian component of the club was running that alongside of a couple American stations as well. And we also sponsor a GLARG VE team. We sometimes we have our own session manager. Occasionally we also partner up with others. But one thing we've also found is when we're trying to get people involved, it's a lot easier for a young person to walk into a room of a people about their age to take an exam versus people who may be slightly older, and that comes across as intimidating. So it's one thing we've started up as well. And then of course, one thing I'll talk about here at the end was the club's special event ways, as we call it, or the work dolls at YARC zones. And the fun thing again too is any club member we have can start a project. It's basically, as long as you're willing to put the time in, we set up the infrastructure of, okay, here's a space on our server where you can talk about it. Here's like a space on our internet server if you need to make a front-facing page. And that's kind of the fun thing where some of our projects have taken off. So for example, the radio repo was a project started about 2 years ago now, with the idea of there's a lot of software being developed for amateur radio, be it digital modes, decoders, encoders, slow scan television camera systems. So a lot of that had been out there, but it had been kind of in a disjointed effort. So some of our teams work to not just kind of catalog links to these, but also starting to incorporate their own software. And then one thing we've recently started up was the Open Ham Wiki, as we've kind of realized that throughout the past 4 years, we've had a lot of great discussions inside of our community server of, hey, like, how do you build a transformer for an end-fed half wave, or what is RF grounding anyways, or how do I get licensed is usually the most common question we get from people just kind of stumbling across our webpage and saying, oh, I should check this out a bit further. So some of our members started with just kind of keeping it initially US focused, as that's what we knew best. And slowly some of our other members from Canada and Australia were able to jump in with their specific processes. And we're looking at adding support for the UK Foundation Intermediate Full, some of New Zealand, and then hopefully later other countries as we get specialists in those areas. So the fun thing is, a lot of what we do is able to also show amateur radio at a global scale. Because oftentimes, I know a bunch of my friends up here at the university, we basically run the best you can do dorm antenna, which is sometimes just a little mag mount on the side of the air conditioner if they let you have that. And you're going to get maybe local-ish range, but being able to connect with amateurs across the world who have the same interests as you, but maybe it's just a different country, is also super cool to be able to see what amateur radio looks like in each country. And on that note, we also entertain a whole bunch of different fun kind of mentorship projects. So we have one guy down in Region 4 who's working on building a 220 megahertz repeater system. We've been following him on that. Another good friend of ours, Adrian, is often our home brewer in chief and is often building things and sharing out like, hey, what works, what doesn't. And we often tag him in and it's like, hey, if we're trying to build something, how do you do it? So he's got a popular end-fed half-wave antenna that a couple of us have picked up and tried to build. And it's always fun to know that we can either call him or someone else in on pretty short notice of, hey, running into some issue, and people are all kind of right there with the same goal of trying to keep people interested and engaged in explaining topics that might otherwise you'd only find in like the antenna book, and you're like, well, I understood none of these words. That's another super helpful thing we have there. So I'm going to slightly shift gears here into the special event station we ran. So one thing we kind of realized was just a one-off conversation of like, what if we had a club-inspired special event station just to see if we could do it? Like, I know we just operated the W1N station here up in Connecticut, and it was kind of the same idea of not necessarily a club anniversary, but still a club project of, let's see if we can get people on the air. And we originally thought it'd just be an internal exercise, like, okay, like how many of our club members can talk to other club members if we have about 1,400 people? But then we kind of got carried away with the planning there and slowly built it up into a full scale, okay, special event, where it went from just our club members to, okay, if we do one WY4RC station in each of the call zones, with the goal of having other operators and club members try and contact stations in all 10 zones. So a little bit of what I'd like to share out as well is kind of, so what did we learn along the way, what you might be able to incorporate in your own kind of events as well. So I think most people are familiar with, but to give a very brief overview. So special event stations can be used to commemorate unique events, time periods, club anniversaries, things that might be important for your town. And we originally considered going for a 1-by-1 call sign, but then figured that in terms of trying to publicize what our club was all about, it might be more fun to instead just use our club call sign, as I mean, we've got it on everything. Club members know what it is, but we wanted to actually show people like, hey, yeah, you can actually operate with this. And so what we opted to do as well was we wanted to do a little QSL card, but we have no physical mailing address. So we opted instead to do it all digitally, where people could submit logs and we had a program that would check it for us and then email out a generated certificate, which was super helpful instead of trying to do it all by hand. So a couple things we learned in the planning. We've never put a special event together before. It was all just a, hey, what if we went ahead and did this? And one thing that we learned when we started to publicize the event is that a lot of the current amateur radio media really relies on you picking specific frequencies and listening in on those for the majority of your event. We originally thought like, okay, we'll just have people sign up and they'll operate whatever's best for them. But we kept running into that and it was like, okay, well, that's one good thing to know for next year of, if you're going to run a special event, pick some specific frequencies and have your operators stick to it, especially if you're going to be calling out. In terms of trying to promote it, one thing we found super helpful was we reached out to the director of publicity and collegiate amateur relations up at the ARL headquarters, but we also opted to go straight to the section managers and their section youth coordinators. Not every section has one, but if you're looking to involve youth or find a good way to reach out to them, most, if not all, the ARL sections these days have a designated youth coordinator who's usually much more in touch with the local youth scene in terms of radio there. And they were probably our best allies in this event of trying to get the word out to also pull people, not just to contact us, but also to get more operators. Because one thing we discovered was for the club call signs, you have to be located in the US or on a remote US station in order to use it with the appropriate licensing. So a lot of our international members weren't able to do it. So in order to backfill that, we reached out to our section youth coordinators all over. We got a pretty strong showing from the South Texas area as well. And then section managers were super helpful with sending things out. We originally thought like, okay, we'll send something and maybe a couple of them would read it. And before we know it, our inboxes were overflowing with us being copied on all section emails. So they are definitely a very useful group of people to have there. One thing we also opted to do was go paperless for this event. We debated having paper log submissions, but again, with no kind of central point to collect those as a club, we just do it all online. And the advantage of doing it online, we had hunters submit their logs through a Google form. And then when they submitted that, it would automatically check the serial numbers from the exchange and could tell us right away if, okay, yep, this all matches up, or this all matches up minus one area or two areas. So we could just go and inspect the oddities in the data instead of doing manual entry into a spreadsheet, sending that out and having a bunch of people work on that all at once. So definitely a lot we learned along the way, but it made for a much better event in fall. A couple other things we learned is I took inspiration from Rob's idea to use a Google Sheet to try and manage out all of the areas. And that was our initial plan. And then we realized that would have worked if it was just one physical station. But when you're managing 10 stations with 10 sheets, it got complex pretty quick. So we actually turned to, of all things, we turned on our Google calendars and discovered you could have people like schedule appointments onto that. So we created a calendar for each of the 10 areas. And then from a real quick glance, we could see, okay, who signed up today in each region? What regions might we need more coverage on? And the bonus was the calendar could be made public. So if you were out there hunting, you're like, oh, I really need section 7 in order to complete this, you could go online and see when someone next scheduled to operate and kind of do an informal schedule, which is super awesome. So a little bit more on that. That's what that kind of looks like there on the right. So if you were a visitor to our event station at any point, you could see, hey, this is who's operating right now or who will be operating later. And we found from some emails we got that people really definitely appreciated that. But during the event itself, some things we learned, and I kind of bolded that with less operating rules is more. A lot of what's out there already about special event stations seems kind of rigid of like, oh, you must only do single sideband between these hours of the day on this frequency or with this amount of power. We originally considered having a minimum power rule because we wanted people to basically be able to be heard. But then some people suggested, well, we already have QRP setups that work fine, or I'll be out on, we had one guy on a mountaintop one day. So eventually we kind of realized, okay, maybe less is more. Trust people, trust their license experience, and just kind of set some general guidelines of, we'd recommend you have this setup, but if you want to get on the air, just talk to us. And we were able to figure that all out. When we spoke with stations, especially not for digital nodes, but for any SSB contacts, we were able to encourage some social media sharing to get some coverage there. And it can be kind of funny how far that travels. We even had a French amateur radio news outlet pick us up and write an article entirely in French about it. I couldn't read much of it, but Google Translate was pretty helpful for that. And one thing we're going to be looking to implement for next year is kind of band captains except for each call area, as we had three of us, me and K3NOP, were managing kind of the event at the high level, but 10 regions of a bunch of different operators was a lot. So we'll be looking to kind of scale that out. But all things considered, it was an excellent event. We had about 72 different operators we had 15 calendar days. I think we probably had closer maybe to 2 or 3 full days of activations, coming in around about 1,000 QSOs. So we were pretty happy with it, all things considered, considering all the different regions and sometimes people operating from suboptimal conditions. But it's definitely a very fun event. So that's everything I have in terms of the slides. That link there, yark.world, takes you just to our club homepage and can give you a little bit more about what do we do and some of the projects we have. But otherwise, I'm going to stop my screen sharing. Would be happy to talk further about anything I might have mentioned prior, any questions you guys may have.
I would imagine you wrote all the software for the programs.
I wish. I've written a bit of it, but there are some people out there who know some of that low-level stuff way better than I do.
You should all be aware that Tyler is a member of the Meriden Amateur Radio Club, so he's not someone who's just popped in. He's been a member for almost a year. So we will have access to his brain, which we're going to remove and put in a jar in the radio room in about 2 weeks. So
needs to be a very large jar, I think, Ed.
As long as I get to borrow it on my exam days, I'll take it.
Observation, Tyler. So there might be a way for you to be inclusive of people that are not in the states in the 1 through 10 or 0 through 10 call or 9 call zones. You also could possibly, and this is probably a stretch, but you could operate your station as a remote accessible station.
Oh, okay.
So that would allow people to, let's say if you're in Spain and you're on holiday or whatever, and you want to operate during a specific event, or you want to provide a call sign from Spain for a specific event, you can log into your call station if it's got the appropriate gear, and they can actually use their own call sign, stroke Whiskey 1 or Kilo 1, whatever, and that would identify them properly as being, okay, yeah, they're in Spain, but they're also accessing a remote station in the States, which would be your station. So that's possible. And that's actually, there's a couple of businesses and a lot of competing or competition type contesting groups that use remote stations that are considered super stations. I'm not an expert on it. I know a little bit about it, and I'd be willing to share that information, but it might be something that you can actually migrate to eventually.
Yeah, no, that'd be awesome. I might actually reach out to you offline about that, as we're looking to implement that here. So back in the physical world on campus, we're looking at setting up a HF station again. I think it's been Dr. Snyder would know the exact number. I think it's been almost a decade since there's been one, but we're looking to set that up. And one thing a lot of the undergraduates I'm working with have mentioned is the hope that we can kind of log into it instead of having to physically walk in there, as it's like I'm the only key holder to the room. So if we can have people log in from anywhere, that would be so much easier.
That's exactly how it's used in a lot of places, and that would actually work for you. People could just log in from their living room using software on a laptop. As long as they have a good internet connection, it works. I've used them myself.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll make a note to follow up with you then. I appreciate it.
This is a note, Tyler. I went ahead when I first heard of your young amateur radio club on Discord. I asked publicly the question, well, how young is young? And I was basically told, well, young is any age. So I went ahead and tried to sign up, and I couldn't actually connect with your server. I'm sure I was doing something wrong.
Oh,
Pretty sure it was operator error, but it kept wanting, it wouldn't accept my existing Discord account. It wanted me to sign up with a new fresh email, and I didn't want to do that. So I
Oh,
just
that's
abandoned
weird.
it.
Conversely, I joined up while Tyler was in his monologue. I actually joined the Yark Discord, thinking, okay, if you ever need an Elmer, I'm here. I know I'm not a young person, but
Oh, no. By definition, you are a young person, Rob.
well, I like that. I like that philosophy.
I
All
also
relative.
jumped into the Discord server a day or two back, and I didn't have too much trouble, but I guess I was lucky.
Okay, shameless plug for the group. Join Discord, install the software. It's not intrusive. I love it. It's an easy way to communicate. You can exchange large files. You can exchange personal messages. You can have it on your cell phone if you got one of those. You can have it on a computer. I've got one of those. I've got it on every single media that I have. And I enjoy it immensely because it's just instant communication, not intrusive, doesn't hog bandwidth. It's a really good platform.
I'll try again tomorrow, Tyler. But
yeah, and feel free to
really,
reach out if you're running into trouble.
I'll shoot you an email. Really great presentation. I like your use of Google Calendars across 10 different areas, combining them. I think that was a very elegant way to solve a problem, and I could see that being used in different kinds of situations. So
I agree with that. It was genius. I was thinking, how would you do that using a spreadsheet like we use? And I'm like, I don't know. How would I do that? And then you laid it right out there like, oh, yeah, that's genius. That's simple.
Yeah, because there was one thing when we were looking at it, we all immediately thought like, oh, we'll just make a shared spreadsheet and have people sign up, kind of how we did the W1N event. But the more we looked at it, it just turned into this monolithic nightmare of, okay, now we have 10 of them with 15 tabs each. And then someone realized we could just make a really quick thing on our Google Calendar. So you set that up and you had the advantage of people could self-select whatever times they wanted. And the way we did it, just to capture some information, it was so like when you signed up, it asked like, okay, what's your location? So people could just put their call region, what frequency they're going to be on. And then if I were a visitor to like the public calendar, I could click on a block and say, oh, hey, someone's in region 7. It would say currently on this frequency. And then it just made things so much easier. So it was like a live updating, we're on air page. Like if you've ever seen the Parks on the Air website where it's got like all the spotting information on the homepage, it was kind of like an improvised spotting page based on people's signups.
I have a question about your software repo.
Sure.
Is the goal there to make open source equivalents of commercial programs, or is it just more of a general anything goes type of thing?
The focus, as I understand it, is definitely more on the open source side of things, as we have a couple members who are not always super happy with proprietary protocols that are used on air that are usually published with like something online to meet the technical requirement of, okay, this like the schema is published or something, but there's no way to like decode it on your own. So a lot of it
Right.
is kind of open source replacements, but we do some cataloging as needed for kind of other commercial alternatives when nothing else exists.
I see. All right.
And then one other fun thing that we learned along the way is for anyone who may be curious, the .radio like URL, apparently the guys who do it usually charge this exorbitant fee for names added, but they have a almost 75% off or something if you want your call signs like N2RTS.radio as a website. So I don't necessarily see the need for me personally. I know some people are definitely into that, but it was one fun thing we discovered where they gave us a break on the price for the community effort, which was fun. But yeah, it's definitely fun to see how far we've come as a club, because it was originally it was a one-off idea in 2017 that we're like, okay, this might be fun. And then years later, here we are, and it was a part of what kind of helped get me out of the technician hole. So I remember when I got licensed it was like August of 2021. It was 3 days before I went off to school and came up here and was like, okay, I got this. Now what? I think this is probably all of it. Was playing around on UHF, VHF. And then they're like, hey, you should come see the world at HF, send me over some study material, got introduced to the guys at Ham Study, picked that up, and then just ran the rest of them. So it was really kind of fun as a way of getting involved when I didn't know anyone else, and then being able to just kind of take it and run with it and kind of grow in radio with them as long with the club up here. So definitely would consider it a very positive influence on my radio career.
Tyler, you mentioned that you got your technician license remotely via a California outfit.
Yep.
How was that experience for you?
It was super smooth. So we're partnered with the Greater Los Angeles Area Radio Group, GLARG. They're one of the 14 VECs, and what we but the nice thing about it is so where I was located in Virginia originally before coming up here is there was no club within 25 miles of me. And so trying to convince my mom at the time, like, hey, can I, go 75 miles down south to take this exam real quick? She was like, are you crazy? And so I was like, okay, maybe not. But then looking online, there are dedicated testing teams. I went with the AE7TD out of Washington State. But our club now, WY4RC, has a testing team there. It's actually super straightforward because the advantage is as the candidate, you just have to find some sort of room that's empty, or you can even cover your desk monitor. And the way we do the experience is actually, so I'll put this link down here in the chat for anyone curious. The website is exam.tools. And so what the nice thing about that is everything is done over the internet. So instead of having paper, you can do printed tests and actually scan them using the grade cam, which is great if you're doing in-person tests. I've never had to do one, but as a candidate, I logged into a Zoom. I was greeted by someone in the main room. They checked me in, sent me to like a pre-check to make sure my room was good. I was then moved into like a breakout room with 4 examiners, just so we have that buffer in case someone's internet connection drops out. Took the test with them online while I shared my screen and walked away with a call sign grant the next day. So it was super, super easy because I know I don't remember if the ARL still requires you to mail VE docs or if we still do that, but being able to have it do it all digitally was amazing because everyone could sign digitally. It got submitted overnight, and then I woke up the next morning to a brand new call sign. So. And we also find that for youth, it's a lot more, they get the platform because trying to convince them to come take another paper test. First off, do they have anyone in their area? I remember one member we have is from Logan, Utah. And he was like, well, I could drive to Salt Lake City, but that's an hour and a half. And instead being able to bring the test to his door was super awesome.
Did you upgrade to general or extra?
I upgraded to general and extra online with it was with a different V team, but still out of the Los Angeles team. And it was the same exact format of it's all conducted online. And the nice thing too, another reason that we partnered with them is the Los Angeles group waives the exam fees for students and those under 18. So you still do run into the current FCC $35 fee, but the actual exam fees like Laurel are waived for students. So that was another great appeal of like, hey, I mean, they're not going to charge you. You might as well take the test if you think you got it. So it was a nice little, it was a nice extra little bump for some of our members who we were trying to encourage to get licenses. Like, hey, you're already in high school, or you're in college or university somewhere, come take it.
So I'm just going to ask you a question about your opinion. What's the greatest challenge to getting youth involved in the amateur radio these days?
Yeah, I would say trying to show them it's more than just sitting in your basement talking to people. The #1 success I've had here on campus is showing how people can use radio in their projects. I was actually, James AB1DQ and I were talking with a student the other day who came to us he's a humanities student up here, but wants to make some sort of sculpture that incorporates an AM transmitter into his project. He was like, I don't really know where to go, but I saw you guys on the internet, and I think we might actually get a licensee out of this guy because he's been so interested in asking us questions. So we've been feeding him, but the big thing is trying to show people that radio can be a tool and not just something you might do on your own. So that's been one way. Another way is we've partnered with our aerospace engineering group up here on campus is looking at launching a CubeSat. And I believe the club recently got a grant to support something like that, if I'm not mistaken. And one thing we've been able to do is we've partnered with them, and one kind of condition we set was, hey, we're going to help you guys with this, but you really need to get your guys licensed as well so you guys can understand this and operate on your own time as well. We got one new licensee as of May. He was able to get his test in right before all the new things came out and the test pool changed, and they're going to be working on getting some of their own guys licensed so they can maintain continuity of operations. So the big thing from my perspective is if people see something they can do with it, they're going to run with it. But the big thing is just kind of getting people over that mental mindset of what they think amateur radio is and not what it can be.
Yeah,
Does that answer that?
Yeah, we need to get away from cliches, in other words.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a guy that's I don't think he's in the Hollywood Squares here, but we're making some inroads to trying to get involved with launching an amateur radio satellite with what's his name, Ed?
Ray Serbo.
Cyril, that's right. And I forget his call sign, but he's a recently minted CW guy, and he's interested in doing some balloon launch stuff and also amateur radio satellite stuff.
Yeah, if you're
And the
interested
reason-
in balloon launches, I forget the professor's name, but there's a team down at the University of Hartford. They are probably the state's experts on that. They've got a student and faculty team that specifically use amateur radio to do balloon launches, chasing lunar eclipses. So they'll actually travel and like launch balloons during these eclipses, capture a bunch of data and rely on like technician level privileges to get the data back. So if you guys have people interested in that, I'll have to look into my contacts there, but they're some of the best.
We've got some expertise in satellite and kind of rocket launching as well. And, some guys are going to roll their eyes on it, but he's actually got real empirical data there. So
Awesome.
maybe we can point him in the right direction there and get some support from other groups as well. Ed, I know you're going to love that.
Yeah, the idea apparently, and I think Ray may have been involved in the group in Hartford because he's launched multiple balloons over the past several years. So it's not like he's got a open balloon A, insert helium B, launch balloon C. He's a little better than that.
Gotcha.
I don't know if he's done CubeSats, but it shouldn't be too hard with some of the guys who are on this. Dave, NZ1J, and several of the other people are. I think we have all the people we can put together to expand the club in this area, and it would all fall under Rob's Marconi, which is the name of our project. Although it wasn't specifically put in, we certainly can internally reallocate funds as needed to make some of these things happen. So we will talk about that. This was good to know.
Yeah, I'm happy to I'm happy to share whatever funds that have been allocated towards satellites. Things can be put off if we need to. You sound like you're a little nasally, Doc.
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
No, it just sounds that way because my COVID test is positive. So there you go. Happens to the best of us. Well, that shut everybody up. I can just see Paul doing a dance in his fallout shelter somewhere down there.
Nothing better than natural immunity, Ed. Nothing better at all.
Yeah. Well, that's good for you. Congratulations. Let's not go there. We're not going there. So let me ask you a question, Tyler. What is the Yale University's philosophy towards the W1YU? Has anyone changed their opinion at all of the club having a raison d'etre, if you will?
Nothing negative, at least. We've definitely got some more kind of positive light after we've been working alongside the aerospace team, as they have a really good connection with the Dean of Engineering up there. And we've finally convinced the authorities that be in the Health and Safety Engineering Office that adding one more HF antenna isn't going to be a lightning strike risk, which we're very excited about. We actually, one of our team members, it's a bit of a funny story. We won a grant by accident about a year ago when we were building the initial station for UHF VHF. And when we won this, we'd already completed the construction, but it was like, okay, well, we got some extra funds. And when I was talking with Scott Matheson, N3NFP, a former librarian here at the university, who's now, I think he's off to DC at this point, but he was like, hey, we have an HF radio and all that, so no need to go ahead and purchase all that again. So we were able to get it's a bit of a compact, it's an MA5B rotatable beam antenna. And so right now we're restricted to an 11-foot square on the roof of our building, as the other half of the roof is being renovated right now alongside our Natural History Museum. So a little unfortunate in terms of the amount of space we have to work with, but we have an actual room now where we can run things into. So our hope is once we get said HF station up and running, it'll be a excellent kind of recruitment tool as well to show people like, hey, you can actually talk beyond Connecticut and hear the world, or do whatever you might want to do on the HF airwaves, because we have enough people now at the extra or general level. I didn't actually realize this, but my assistant station manager has a good friend who had a general license and apparently never mentioned it. So we've been able to kind of pull people in by friend connections of, hey, I heard you have this. And then we've got 3 first years who are looking to get licensed by the end of the year. Hopefully we're going to bring them into the station tomorrow and show them what it's all about.
Yeah, I don't think Scott is in Washington. He was supposedly working for a firm that's still in New Haven.
Oh,
because
okay.
he's your trustee. He holds the license. So you do
Right.
not want to lose contact with that man.
Yeah, no, that would be bad.
So I think he's still in New Haven. He because he's got a house and you know, other things here. So
Gotcha.
That was
Well, that
the
works for
problem
us,
they
'cause I can-
always had, though.
I can keep bothering him then.
yeah.
All right, I think my camera might be lagging out there, but I'm still here. Anything
there-
else I can take questions on or clarify about either the online club or what we're doing up here at Yale University?
So let me ask the club guys, what do you think about all of this? I know it's a lot of stuff that we're not doing to the extent and the level of sophistication that they're doing. It doesn't seem like it's overwhelming for everybody. There's a bunch of folks who seem to know what's going on. Is this something we should pursue? Or is this, I mean, the club is now big enough. I think we can go off in multiple directions. I don't think we all have to sit and chew a rag and then we have to go on a net and then we have to do something else. The benefit of the club is all the diversification. So what are your thoughts on that?
Are we talking about joining the yard Discord and becoming part of that group? I mean, what
No,
are you
not
talking about, Ed, specifically?
Not necessarily. I'm just talking about, you know, interactions on a collegial basis that may expand some of the things we're doing. I mean, right now, I don't think anybody can by themselves launch a CubeSat or launch a weather balloon. But, you know, we've got someone who's interested in doing that. And my plan is, Ray told me he was under the weather. So when he gets over the weather, we're going, and I get over the weather, we're going to work together, whatever the weather, whether we like it or not, as they say in Little Bear. But we'll get, all these things are doable, I would imagine. Let me ask Dave, Dave, you're a black and square with a red microphone. What are your thoughts about building a CubeSat? That doesn't seem like something that would bamboozle you at all.
Well, I think it's a pretty high bar. I know it's a lot easier than it was decades ago. They have standard platforms and things like that. But there's a lot of issues with spaceflight. There's a lot of G-forces that you got to operate in a vacuum. There's reliability that has to be dealt with, weight issues. I mean, this is a big deal.
Right. Correct.
Yeah, we've been fortunate to be able to take advantage of a lot of the university's facilities for a lot of that, where we can, not even if we have to call in a professor to get their opinion on something, but just having like the fabrication access has been a significant time saver on turning probably what could have been a 7 or 8 year project into something a lot quicker. I think we were originally hoping for a December launch, but that's been pushed back to February due to things outside of our control. But definitely will echo that one part of there's always more testing to do than you think there is.
Ray Sermo, KC1QLS,
Right.
is on the staff of Cheshire Academy, and he brought his class for a number of balloon launches. And I think there's something on YouTube, at least of one of them completely, and it was well done.
Yeah, I think he's retired. Is that right, Bart? He's retired?
I believe that's the case, yes.
Disembodied voice of Bart. Welcome back, by the way, from Hawaii. Glad you came back.
Thank you.
Have you been working with the people at AMSAT on the CubeSat thing?
You talking to who? Tyler or me?
I was asking Tyler. I'm sorry.
Tyler, yep.
Hey, John, can you repeat your question real quick?
Have you been working with AMSAT on the CubeSat project?
I have not personally been in touch with them, but I know one of our student directors has at least touched base with them before they got introduced to us here on campus.
I would think that would be
Yeah.
a good step and a great resource. I mean, they sort of do this stuff for a living, or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have at least a line of communication. I'm just not sure what the extent of that is, but I know that the AMSAT guys were at least the reason they found us here at W1YU of, hey, we heard you guys are radio people and could be another resource locally.
And some of those guys actually belonged to the club at one point. Rich Zaworko and Andy Zaworko, they were both club members. And Rich was the vice president of AMSAT for quite a number of years, and Andy's Andy just graduated. Well, I don't know, probably not just anymore. It's been a while, but you know, there's a track in the club for them.
You know, I mean, amateur radio is, you have people arguing about whether, if it doesn't have a vacuum tube, is it really amateur radio? I've had people complain that with the national traffic system, that sending a traffic by email is not really passing traffic. You either have to drive to the mailbox. I think they will allow email, but they're not allowing people to, or you can, I'm sorry, you're allowed to use the phone, but not email. I mean, that's so anachronistic. So take it to a higher level. Now we're looking at amateur radio being a means to an end rather than necessarily an end in itself. And there are groups of people, younger people presumably, who will take that route, which is what Tyler was talking about. And I think this club has a lot of people who like to sit in basements and watch orange glows. I do myself, but you get out and you look at other areas. And I think if we're going to grow, this is something we should consider and talk about at future meetings. Maybe we'll set some time aside at the year in review in December to see what the club's thoughts are about this. It's all good stuff.
Are there any issues, Ed, with, say, club members who are not part of Yale University, for instance, working on Yale's campus with Yale people, or is there any kind of barriers there to us?
The barriers that I'm aware of are kind of going away. Access to some of the labs, we'd have to talk to specific people in advance, but definitely not impossible anymore.
Okay.
Probably one of the biggest problems is going to be you have to get a bivalent vaccine in order to get on campus. Sorry to tell you guys that, but you need it. I was supposed to get mine today, but my wonderful innate immunity didn't seem to work. Although I kept it at bay for 3 years. I guess, you know, I have to win every day. It only had to win once, that's to say. But I don't see any reason why, because I don't know what I am anymore, Tyler. I used to be the president. Apparently I've been displaced. And now I'm just someone who hung around and runs the net a couple times a month. So
I don't know what I am either, but I keep showing up every month.
Yeah. I don't think it's a problem. I think we will be able to have access, especially if we come bearing gifts, AKA funds. And my understanding is if we do a good job on this Marconi project, I think the league is going to ask the ARDC for more funds for more projects. And we could put in launching a satellite, a CubeSat, or launching a balloon. And I think we could get money to support that. I don't know how much it costs. We're not going to get $40,000 to do that for sure, but we might get, you know, something up to 20, 25,000. Trouble is, a lot of other people may have the same ideas, but we'll see how it goes. I think this is a good opportunity for the club.
Absolutely. I mean, as we do it up here, at least a lot of the grants we write, I mean, might as well submit and see what you can get.
Yeah.
All right.
So just one other quick question. One of the main sources of club members has been our VE sessions. And the thought of having all these VE sessions online with all of the lack of interpersonal relationships that Bart has made his modus operandi, may go out the window, and I'm concerned about that. It doesn't mean we can't continue to do them, but I would not want to just eliminate any in-person.
Yeah, no, I
exam
agree with
testing.
that. We did the remote stuff and often promoted to people when there specifically wasn't a club around, as was the case when I first got licensed. But it's a nice capability to have, or at least one advantage we saw was the paperless option of you submit everything inside of this one computerized system. At the end, you get either the right output file. I think Maria over at the ARLVC can set up a cool system that like talks to this exam platform, so it's all automated. So we saw the advantages of switching over it mainly because we are online anyways, and it didn't make sense to mail someone a bubble sheet to fill out on Zoom. But having that kind of in-person connection, like I remember when I left my technician license test, the three examiners basically said, hey, this is your first step, but go onto this website, put in your zip code, find a local club you can talk to as well. So it's definitely not meant to take the clubs out of the equation.
Right.
It was just a perfect stopgap measure for if you couldn't travel. But it's also a nice way to kind of accidentally collect members from maybe outside of your direct geographic region, as I now belong to a small club out in California now, thanks to some of the people I've met through the examiner team. But I think remote exams have a place. It definitely shouldn't replace the in-person sessions as long as we're able to offer them, because that is an important way of being able to connect with people. But I think both of them have their place to answer that.
I think you could use the internet exams and, try and engage with the person and suck them into a more, personal relationship on the back of that, so long as the distances aren't unworkable.
Yeah, I mean, I've done probably about at least 20 of these online VE sessions. And what we often will do, if we have enough time and we know the candidates in advance and we know where everyone's from, we can try and put people into specific examiner groups based on where people are from. So we had one guy, I think KZ1B, I might be missing that call, but his name is Bob. And when Bob's from Utah, so whenever we had candidates from around that region, we'd send them to him because he knew all about like their statewide VHF system to be able to like, hey, get your license and find me on this. So it's definitely, there are ways to do it. It's not going to be as natural of, hey, we're all in the same town, but there definitely are ways to connect with candidates and keep them engaged, and then hopefully have them come back to get their general at some point.
We had a
I,
discussion in years past or times past about hosting online VE sessions, and there wasn't enough knowledge at that point or enough stick-to-itiveness to thoroughly investigate it. But it's great to hear that it actually works. Have you ever encountered any negativity, any negative aspects doing the online VE stuff?
Not
Tyler?
necessarily. So I'm going to send that link to the platform. I don't know if they have the demo on that one. Otherwise, I'll have to find it. But we found it's actually pretty versatile. And maybe the hardest part sometimes is just working with the candidate to have them understand the platform. I mean, I've personally tested someone taking the test on their cell phone because it's what they had, or we had one guy on a laptop in an RV in the middle of nowhere, and he had like some like that Starlink internet stuff. So we've definitely worked in maybe suboptimal conditions, but it's nothing we couldn't handle, at least. Like we've had students, I think the youngest I've had personally take a test with me was maybe 11. I had an 11-year-old and his parent taking the exam at the same time together. We've had that. We've had maybe just kind of your average run-of-the-mill college student, a couple people from different bases around the world when they're like, this is the only place I can find to get a license at a time that works for me. So we haven't ran into any kind of odd issues. Usually the hardest part is just whatever end user technology is in the way, as we've probably run I want to say almost 40,000 exams across all the different VECs that use this platform. So it's pretty robust. The only hard part sometimes is just getting everyone familiar with it. But it's one of those, once you've done it once, it's easy to go through. There's an interface on the examiner side that shows you like, okay, the candidate is up to this point, or you need to click here to sign their 605. It's all very intuitive.
It's interesting to hear all this discussion. It's
Yeah, because it's one
like,
of those, I'll say my original radio interest actually came out of it was a contact with the International Space Station in 2019. I was a scout back home and they did an event at one of our national jamborees, and I thought that was super cool. Looked into it and was like, oh, well, I don't know how to take this test. And remote testing wasn't really a thing prior to 2020. Like it had existed with KL7AA, the Anchorage Amateur Radio Club up in Alaska, had developed a model for it, but it was still being worked out at that point where like you had to like maybe almost have like two laptops like watching like your face and then also your keyboard. It was a little clunky. And so I was kind of like, that doesn't really seem worth it. And then in 2021, people had figured out remote testing, exam tools had been introduced. What's actually kind of funny about exam tools is it was never actually designed originally for online testing over the internet. It was actually designed by a VE out of Utah who was tired of having to manually grade exams, as he could then like create a custom bubble sheet, have people fill it in, and then use his phone camera to scan it and grade it. And then with the demand, it got upgraded to be able to do it kind of all on the computer. So what we were able to then do is almost have same day turnaround to the FCC instead of packaging up bubble sheets and exams and mailing it off to the VEC headquarters and then have them turn it over to the FCC days later. So yeah, just a little bit more about that, if that helps.
There's an old saying for that: necessity is the mother of invention.
Absolutely.
I'm licensed for 66 years.
A quick question.
And I got,
How do the clubs collect their fee?
So our VEC traditionally didn't require it, but for those who did, the way we did it was you'd sign up on one site and then the club would get an email saying, hey, you've had a candidate register, and you could set up like a custom email. And all we'd do is just require you to either fill out a Google form saying I'm a current student and here's why I'm enrolled, or you would get a PayPal invoice or like a email to send a payment to. And then on exam day, we just go through the receipts and make sure, okay, we have candidate John Smith and we see he paid on this date. So we can even do that over the internet now with a couple of clubs that have that set up. And for maybe, because we have a couple individual examiners as well, the VEC sometimes will run like a session manager wide PayPal account that can do that as well. So it's all over the internet.
Pick it up, Johnny Lingo.
I've been licensed for 66 years. It's interesting to see that in this year, you're still trying to improve the system. It went all the way through the years. There's been changes, and I expect changes to continue for years to come.
John, you're gonna be beat by 5.
I was at Lehigh University, a freshman, when I got my novice. I had to learn code. I had to travel to Philadelphia from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, to take the general exam. And then the FCC and the league got incentive licensing. So I had to go to New York to get my 25 words a minute test done. And now it's a lot simpler. You don't even need code.
Yeah, and I'll just say one thing on that, if you don't mind, John, but it's kind of interesting. I know with the removal of the code requirement, it's kind of fun to watch people my age kind of stumble upon it and they're like, oh, what's this? And then try and remember like, okay, so what is this whole one-up thing? So I definitely will say it's probably less common than what it used to be, but people are still discovering and still picking it up. I mean, when people get put between some of the digital modes or CW at times, they'll still go for it because it's a bit of a fun challenge. So definitely hasn't faded out among popularity among my generation. I think it's a little less common until people stumble across it.
It's
Well-
a good way to put it. And I have to say, we still have folks that are meeting on a weekly basis, daily basis, and offering code classes. And once there's enough interest, I'm sure Bob will re-engage a class. So I'll use the term lurking. He's lurking in the background.
Yes, that I am, and I'm ready to start another class if I get help with another co-instructor, and be happy to teach another CW class to a group. So you guys get together. If you want to do it, let me know.
If you look at the activity, FT8 is taking over a huge chunk.
It's definitely, I will say it's definitely taken over parts of the data band, but it's probably been one of the best ways of pulling people in at the same time. Because one thing I've found is some of our students aren't the biggest fan of having to actually talk to people, the horror, but being able to show them like, hey, like you can do digital-ish signal transmission, and that catches a lot of our researchers' eyes as well. And when they're like, oh, I could see several applications for this with some of the work I'm doing. And then we can usually use that as kind of a building off to say, hey, well, what do you think you might be able to take advantage of, or how can we help further? So it's been a nice little thing to be able to show people as well as my own little personal interest on the side.
Well, FT8 is going to be the death of ham radio. Just like packet radio was going to be the death of ham radio. Just like FM was going to be the death of ham radio. Just like single sideband. Just like AM. Just like that continuous wave stuff when we had to give up our spark gaps. That was going to be the death of ham radio too. So,
Do I denote sarcasm in your voice?
yeah, you might. Yeah, you know.
I'm so proud.
It's
Okay.
oh, change is inevitable.
Yes. Thank you.
Embrace change, or it will overcome you.
I've played around a little with JS8Call, which is nice because it's similar to FT8, but you do actually get to put your own custom message in it, so it's not quite so aloof.
What was that again?
JS8Call, because that has a, you can put your own data in it.
JS9. Okay, JS9 or JT9. JT9.
Well, whatever it is, I forget. I thought it was JS8, but anyway.
Was it a WSJTX kind of software thingy?
Yeah, but it's a different guy, and the nice thing about it is you can actually put your own text in the messages. It's not like FT8 where it's all predefined. You can have a payload that you can put in, which enables you to personalize it a little more, but you still don't have to speak.
Yeah,
if you like.
I put a link to that in the Zoom chat, and what we
thank you.
found is you can, like, it's so much more than FT8. We've even run entire nets off of JS8Call, as you can designate one station as like an operator, and since you can send custom messages, you can do broadcasts, you can take check-ins, you can even have people act as relays to other stations that might not be able to hear the net control. So it's really versatile.
Yeah, it's quite widely used in emergency comms as well as an easy way to pass messages.
What's the difference between JS8 and PSK31?
Oh, interesting. I've learned another thing about this hobby that I love. JS8Call. So I'm thinking of JT9, JT65. I've done both of those modes. And
Right,
those are another Joe West kind of software kind of thing, but this is different. This is not a Joe West kind of thingy.
I wonder what the object is of making an FT8 call. Are you doing it because it's simple to do? And if so, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to work all states? Are you trying just what are you trying to do?
I would like to say, and I would like to offer up that forward error correction is a really great thing, because it just corrects a lot of problems, that like noise problems. And that's the allure, I believe, of the WSJTX modes, is that there's a lot of FEC in there, and that all of those messages come through because they get checked and double checked and triple checked, and only the real message gets through. So it's a positive way to get the message through when conditions are not so great.
Yeah, I put a little thing in the chat box as well, talking a little bit more about the reason they built JS8, because they wanted that robustness that FT8 gets, where you have that error correction and being able to get it out on a weak signal, but also being able to kind of get a message out as well. So it wasn't designed as a contesting worked all states thing, but was definitely more of a, if you're working in weak signal conditions, here's a way to maybe have a full-on, maybe traditional QSO instead of just a digital signature exchange and move on.
Well, is there really a difference? I mean, not to gore anybody's sacred cows, but is there really a difference between a typical a CW? Here's my call. Got your call. 7-3. Thanks. A contest exchange. N1 GNV. You're 5973. Okay, well, the computer's doing that, but I'm not having a rag chew. Is there any real substantive difference between those?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I ultimately don't think there's a difference. I think it's just more of a enabling another means of making contact for weak signal conditions. So I think it's maybe more akin to look at it as another way of getting your word out instead of what is the message, if that makes any sense.
I've never done FT8 or any of the other digital modes for that matter, other than I played with Packet 25 years ago. But I've never done FT8 or any of those. But if it's having fun with radio, I think that's great. And what's the point of FT8? Well, what's the point of ham radio?
Whatever it takes to keep people involved is what we kind of go for, especially when I'm trying to pull friends in. It's like, hey, if you can find something that interests you, by all means, go for it.
An old friend of mine, and you guys have heard me say this before, I'm sure, an old friend of mine always said there's 30 different kinds of ham radio. And, there's something there for everybody.
I think that Tyler's got a good point there. With FT8 modes, you're just interested in getting the message through. It's not necessarily a rag chew like you state, John, or sideband where you have to listen to someone's voice give you a message. It's a digital mode, like a lot of digital modes. The point is get the message through. And I think that's the point when you're in weak signal propagation. This is a way to get the message through. And we've seen that during this low sunspot cycle, so that you can still communicate with places like Japan and South Cook Island, North Cook Island, and other such distant places for us. You can still get a message through.
Well, agreed. This weekend is the CQ Worldwide DX contest. I'm going to play in it for a while, and but it's going to be N1 GNV. You're 5905. Thanks for the contact. Bang. Next. So is that substantively different than my computer going rah, rah, rah? No. I mean, there's no rag chewing there. There's no. I have no idea what the other guy's name is, where, and all right. I know by his call sign he's in France. Okay, where in France? What does he do for a living? Does he have kids? But there's none of that. You're 5905. Thanks. Next.
That's
FT8
what
is
I'm
the
talking
podcast.
about, the same thing, basically. It doesn't make any difference what mode you're on. The bottom line is there's a sender and a receiver. The sender has a call sign, the receiver has a call sign.
Yep.
Now you're going to sit and collect QSOs. Some are interesting. The interest in making those QSOs is broad. Somebody can be interested in, because of the contest, meeting the rules of the contest, picking the call signs of people who are interested in it to gain points, or people interested in spending time rag chewing. There's just about all kinds of reasons. The bottom line is 2 call signs, sender and receiver, and what interests you in collecting those varies.
Exactly. And
Right.
I should have added,
First
should have
digital
added-
mode I ever ran was Wigwag.
I should have added, I'm going to get in the contest this weekend and I'm going to have fun doing it.
Sounds good. John, I hate to break in here, but I'm going to unfortunately have to step away here to run to my next commitment here. But just wanted to say thank you everyone for having me to talk tonight. I apologize for the camera coming off. My laptop battery's flashing 5% down in the bottom right corner. So just wanted to say thanks again for coming to listen to me talk tonight. If you have any questions or would like to follow up on anything specific I've mentioned, feel free to reach out. It's my first last at yale.edu, or you can just look me up on QRZ and I've got an email up there. So just wanted to say at least real quick, feel free to stay, I guess, but I'll have to head out, but thanks for having me.
Thank you very
Tyler.
much, Tyler.
Thank you for your presentation.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Bonsoir, mon ami.
Has everybody sold an FT8 now?
Hey, my first digital mode was Wigwag. All we had was a flag. Did
I think the closest way to leave it is just like FT8 is just swapping call signs. And the question is whether you're interested in the signal or you're interested in who sends it.
It was a good night. I'm going to plug out.
See you, Joe.